Teddy Goff was Hillary Clinton's chief digital strategist, and he said that the internet made advertising to swing voters less important. Quote, "We've got to care as much about engaging our supporters as we do about winning the hearts and minds of 2% of people in Ohio." If Goff believed that swing voters were less important, then his counterpart on Trump's team believed the exact opposite. Alexander Nix recognized that in 2016, swing voters were more important than ever because micro-targeted ads made it affordable to influence people. This is why Alexander Nix and his firm, Cambridge Analytica, focused on using micro-targeted ads to persuade swing voters. Cambridge Analytica is the focus of part 4 of this video, The Mystery. Although the 2016 election was a test of two candidates, it was also a test of two different digital media strategies. The candidates brought their base voters, and the strategists fought to persuade swing voters. Essentially, Clinton and Goff pitted conventional communication against micro-targeted messages from Trump and Nix. Had the two approaches been equivalent, swing voters would have split evenly, and Hillary Clinton would now be our president. The surge of swing voters supporting Trump showed that micro-targeting is stronger. I'm not the first person to talk about Cambridge Analytica, so I want to briefly note what else has been said and why this story, Microtarget, is different. After the election, many firms claimed to have the secret sauce for Trump's win, and it wasn't clear who was legitimate. The New York Times noted that many companies compete in the market for political microtargeting, and Cambridge Analytica claimed to have developed something unique, psychographic profiles. But Cambridge executives now concede that the company never used psychographics. BuzzFeed was even more dismissive. Cambridge Analytica says its behavioral communications technique helped land Trump in the White House. Don't believe it, say former campaign staffers, employees, and other GOP digital strategists. These articles focus narrowly on whether Nix used psychographics to cater to the audience's personality. But there are many steps to persuasion, and Cambridge made many claims. These articles miss the bigger picture. How did Cambridge microtarget voters in the first place? Another issue with the articles is that they treat Cambridge's technology like a black box, and they rely on interviews with so-called microtargeting experts about its effectiveness. The articles don't explain what's inside the black box, although it is true that there are other firms that do microtargeting. In fact, there's a whole book called Victory Lab that details how Obama's team used microtargeting in 2012. But Obama only microtargeted swing voters via direct mail. Before 2016, no presidential campaign had deployed micro-targeted ads online because it wasn't technologically feasible or economically affordable. Until 2016, the election system was essentially separate from advertising technology. None of the articles highlights what I believe was Cambridge's most significant breakthrough, creating Project Alamo to weave together the election system with ad tech. With Microtarget, my goal is to let you decide for yourself. Instead of narrowly focusing on psychographics, I explain how Cambridge wove together the election system with ad tech. And instead of treating Project Alamo like a black box, I lay out the chain of events driving the technology. So here is Alexander Nix explaining Cambridge Analytica in his own words, at a conference a few months after Donald Trump became president. Nix presented this slide about segmenting audiences. He talked about creating small groups of similar people, such as females or African Americans, to receive messages that each group would find compelling. He went further and proposed customizing messages based on demographics, such as age and geographics, location. He even talked about customizing ads based on psychographics, meaning people's personality. In this slide, he shows two 40-year-old white men that live in the same town. With conventional communications, they would receive the same ad. Nix says, if we knew that both of these individuals were in the market for a car, we might use psychographics to target and message them differently. With psychographics, Nix is proposing sending one car advertisement to the introvert and sending a different ad to the extrovert, which is a remarkable claim. But what should also catch our attention is Nix's claim to identify people in the market for a car, because this is a holy grail of advertising. We just talked about how 90% of Clinton's audience was wasted because her team used conventional communications. Nix is talking about eliminating that waste. And if Nix could identify people in the market for a car, you could see how we could also identify people in the market for a political candidate. We call those people swing voters. News reports derided Nix for proposing psychographics, but not using it during the campaign. But psychographics was only a nice to have. It wasn't that important. Think about what Nix is saying that he did without psychographics. He still identified people that cared about a topic and advertised only to those people. So what if they saw the same ad? Avoiding people with firm opinions saves a ton of money. This applies directly to the 2016 election. Yes, it would have been incredible for Cambridge to look into the crowd and identify swing voters, determine that they're Cole supporters, and show different ads to extroverts and introverts. Cambridge admitted that they didn't use psychographics for Trump. So what? Nix still used microtargeting to send Cole ads to Cole supporters. Even without psychographics, these microtargeted ads were much more effective than Clinton's conventional communications. And Nix saved money by not showing those ads to anyone else in the crowd, whereas Clinton wasted 90% of her budget. Going back to Nix's presentation, he expands on this idea. Quote, "Back in the 1960s, the era of Mad Men, brilliant minds pushed creative concepts onto an audience in the hope that the messages would resonate. Today, we can use big data to understand exactly what people need to hear way before the creative process is even started." Nix is talking about conventional communication in the age of Don Draper from the TV show Mad Men, who delivered weak, impersonal messages to large groups. The only way to know if a message worked was to send it to the whole group and hope. By contrast, Nix is saying that he put persuadable people in small groups by the issue they cared about before he started messaging them. And then he sent each group micro-targeted ads that they'd find compelling, which resulted in those persuadable people voting for Trump. So why couldn't Don Draper do this in 1960, but Nix could in 2016? In one word, data. Nix lists his data sources, and there were a lot. Nix says that conventional communications are finished. Billboards are like the dinosaurs. Quote, "Blanket advertising is dead. The idea that millions of people are going to receive one message is something that our children will never understand. Marketers are writing to audiences as individuals, such that a husband and a wife in the same household receive different messages from the same company about the same product." When we talk about micro-targeted ads, this is what we're talking about. A marketer sending different messages to a husband and a wife to get them to take the same action. Buy that product, or vote for my candidate. Nix uses technical jargon that may seem overwhelming, but as long as you focus on the chain of events, you'll be able to understand. Nix shows this data management platform that he built. He doesn't name it, but I believe it's called Project Alamo. Nix says, "We can use digital marketing to upload offline target segments with cookies." Although upload offline target segments sounds like gibberish, Nix is actually talking about weaving together the election system with ad tech. Nix is saying that he used voters' name and address information provided by the government, people's offline data, to show those people ads on their phones and laptops. I refer to this weaving technology as the solution to the coupon problem. In 2014, I worked for a company that solves this problem. In the persuasion video, I explain how this works. Nix didn't solve the coupon problem on his own. He just bought a commercially available tool that many marketers use. Nix goes on to explain how he divided people into small groups of similar voters. We began with research, 1,500 polls each week in each state, that is, 75,000 surveys per week to inform our predictive models. Again, this is tremendous. Nix is saying that he used thousands of surveys to accurately categorize millions of people. Many marketers have wanted to segment audiences, but in 2016, Nix could do this because he had data. Again, Nix added other people's work into Project Alamo. In the persuasion video, we'll also talk about how Michał Kaczynski solved this survey problem for personality, combining surveys and psychographics. Nix used Kaczynski's solution to build models relevant to the election. In particular, which issues would persuade which voters. Quote, "We use surveys to build predictive models to identify people and engage them in the most compelling way. We created candidate preference models, which candidates appeal to which voters. Turnout models, understanding whom was going to vote and who wasn't. Finally, issue models, predicting which issues appealed to which members of the target audience." Nix is saying that by surveying a few people in the crowd, he identified who was persuadable and which issue would influence them. Most importantly, the models used data to identify other persuadable people that didn't even take the survey. Nix goes on to say, "We placed over $100 million of digital ad buy for the Trump campaign and tens of millions of dollars of data-driven television ads." And he says that yielded 1.4 billion digital ad impressions. Let's do some math to see what that meant for an individual swing voter. $100 million divided by 1.4 billion ads comes to just 7 cents per ad. Bloomberg reported that Trump's team focused on 13 million people. So doing more math, that comes to 100 ads per person. And one last calculation means that Nix spent just $7 to influence each swing voter with personalized, micro-targeted ads. In 2010, Slate asked, how much does it cost to buy a vote? Meaning, how much does it cost to persuade a swing voter? They found one analysis that said $175, and another analysis estimated $59. Cambridge Analytica spent just $7 on micro-targeted ads for each swing voter. When we talk about affordable influence, this is what we're talking about. Nix also mentions tens of millions of dollars of data-driven television ads. What Nix is saying here is that he didn't just micro-target swing voters on their phones and laptops, he micro-targeted them on their TVs too. He used household and zip code information. Now, this isn't as fine-grained as laptops, since husband and wife would see the same ads, but it's still much more effective than conventional advertising. Nix ends his presentation by saying, "Microtargeting is not a panacea. You cannot make a bad candidate into a good one. But in political campaigns, technology can make a huge difference." This comes back to the original mystery of the election. Cambridge Analytica doesn't do mind control. They couldn't persuade people with firm opinions. In fact, a lot of their success came from avoiding those base voters altogether. What Nix claims they did was take swing voters that should have split evenly, break them into small groups that would respond similarly to the same message, and persuade them to support Donald Trump. To summarize this video, it's clear that swing voters surged for Trump at the last minute. Many people attributed that surge to the news media reporting on the Comey letter. But the Clinton and Trump campaigns were also reaching out to voters at that same time. I hope that you're considering that Trump's micro-targeted ads could have had the strongest effect. Before we get into the details of micro-targeting, we'll first talk about historical precedent, so that you'll know which aspects of the micro-target story to focus on. The next video is all about following the chain of events.